Namaste, aloha, and welcome again to another Krishna Katha story time. My name is Janapati Das, and it's nice to see you again. I've been away for a little while, and we're back to read a very exciting of the Deliverance of Sisupala today. So I'd like to offer my respectful obeisances to all of you for tuning in today. Thank you very much. Please take a moment, if you haven't already, to like, subscribe, and make comments. Share the videos on the page. And if you haven't already, let people know about the different Krishna stories that we have here. I'd like to take this moment to offer my most humble obeisances unto my spiritual master, of whose lotus feet I place my head at, in the hopes that I may be pleasing to him and to his dear Gurudev Bhaktivedanta Swami, who translated the Krishna book that we are reading the story from. Everything I have learned about spiritual knowledge, I've learned from my Gurudev. So I offer my most humble obeisances at his lotus feet and hope that I may be pleasing unto him. We would like to take the moment right now. I take the moment to hear and repeat Krishna's names now. So please join along. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimate Siraswarupananda, Paramahamsa Itanamini, Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimate Siraswarupananda, Paramahamsa Itanamine, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur, Nitya Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur, Nitya Gaur, Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur, Nitya Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur, Nitya Gaur, Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur, Nitya Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur, Nitya Gaur, Hari Bol. Nityananda, Nityananda, Hari Bol. Nityananda, Nityananda, Hari Bol. Haribol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, it's been a little while, but as we know, the Rajasuya sacrifice is about to go on. And so many things had to happen for the Rajasuya sacrifice to happen. So you went back and, there were princes who were delivered from I'm forgetting his name, Jardsanda, right? King Jardsanda had imprisoned so many kings. Krishna, Lord Krishna and Bhimasena and Arjuna went in the disguise of Brahmanas to Jardsanda to beg battle with him. And then, of course, he fought with Jardsanda. Jardsanda fought with Bhima. And, of course, Krishna hinted at the point of how Jardsanda could be killed by splitting him in half, bifurcating him. That was successful. They were able to release the princes. And we had the wonderful prayers by the princes to Lord Krishna. And so many wonderful things had happened, right? And in a few days, we'll be celebrating the appearance day of Lord Balaram, because we're coming close to the celebration of Lord Krishna, right? As well, in a few weeks. So I would recommend go back and listen to some of the Lord Balaram stories. Today, what we're going to read about is the deliverance of Sisupala, right? So we have the Rajasuya sacrifice, and remember Sisupala. Sisupala, of course, was the suitor that Rukmini had, brother Rukmi had set Rukmini up to marry, although everybody felt like Krishna and Rukmini should really actually be brought together. And then Rukmini and Krishna eloped. There was a battle, and Sisupala was defeated. And Rukmi's, actually, Sisupala didn't even fight. He was kind of cowardly. But Rukmi fought with Krishna and was defeated. And later, of course, killed by Lord Balaram in the game of chess. So, all things, what is that? All things end well that end well. What was that? So, I forget what that Shakespeare's saying, but all's well that ends well. That's it. All's well that ends well, right? So all is well that ends well with Krishna. Always, things always end well with Krishna and Balaram. Lord Balaram means strength, and Lord Balaram, of course, is very powerful. He as Anantashesha supports the whole universe upon his hoods. That's just a minor expansion of Lord Balaram. But the real strength that Lord Balaram gives is spiritual strength. He is the original spiritual master, and he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead as servant. He is a dear servant of Krishna. He's like always keeping an eye on Krishna. He's the first expansion of Lord Krishna. And Lord Balaram is the source of all spiritual strength. So we can take shelter of Lord Balaram because he is non-different. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So on this day, in a few days for Balaram's appearance day, we can take shelter of Lord Balaram, read about Lord Balaram, glorify Lord Balaram, and most importantly, hear and chant the names of Krishna and Balaram. So we've come to the story of the deliverance of Sisupala. So Sisupala, of course, is going to be at this Rajasuya sacrifice, but we'll see what happens and how Krishna arranges things. King Yudhishthira became very happy about hearing the details of the Jardsanda episode, and he spoke as follows: "My dear Krishna, O eternal form of bliss and knowledge, All the exalted directors of the affairs of this material world, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and King Indra, are always anxious to receive and carry out orders from you. And whenever they are fortunate enough to receive such orders, they immediately take them and keep them in their hearts. O Krishna, you are unlimited. And although we sometimes think of ourselves as royal kings and rulers of the world and become puffed up over our paltry positions, we are very poor in heart. Actually, we are fit to be punished by you, but the wonder is that instead of punishing us, you so kindly and mercifully accept our orders and carry them out properly. Others are very surprised that your lordship can play the part of an ordinary human, but we can understand that you are performing these activities just like a dramatic artist. Your real position is always exalted, exactly like that of the sun, which always remains at the same temperature both during the time of its rising and the time of its setting. Although we feel the difference in temperature between the rising and the setting sun, the temperature of the sun never changes. You are always transcendently equiposed, and thus you are neither pleased nor disturbed by any condition of material affairs. You are the Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead. And for you, there are no relatives. There are no relativities. My dear Madhava, you are never defeated by anyone. Material distinctions, this is me, this is you, this is mine, this is yours, are all conspicuous by dint of their absence in you. Such distinctions are visible in the lives of everyone, even the animals. But those who are pure devotees are freed from these false distinctions. Since these distinctions are absent in your devotees, they cannot possibly be present in you. I am you and you are me and we are here together, whatever that Beatles song is, right? This is me, this is you, this is mine, this is yours, this is how we live our life. This is my money, this is my dog, this is my wife, this is your house, so you think about these things in the terms of material existence and ownership of things that really we do not have ownership. And actually, when we say this is mine or this is my sister or whatever, what exactly are we talking about? Are we talking about the spirit soul? No, most of the time, 99.99%, we're talking about the material designation, the false identification with the body and the mind of ourselves and others. But actually, the reality is that we are spirit soul, Jivatma, and that all the living entities, whether they're in bodies of animals or humans or plants or bugs or whatever, all living entities, spiritual in essence, temporarily in the body of a material existence. And just like twigs that come together on a stream, we come together, people, relatives, people, friends, situations that where we meet people and we relate to them, and maybe sometimes those things separate and go down a different path on the river. But eventually those relationships, even if they stay a long time, say husband and wife or friends or fathers, mother, brothers, eventually time will separate all the living entities from each other. So it is best to spend your existence, your time in your life to come to cultivate spiritual knowledge about your real identity as spirit soul and your relationship with the Supreme Lord. After satisfying Krishna in this way, King Yudhishthira arranged to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. So we were talking about the Rajasuya sacrifice. It's a major sacrifice for the emperor of the world who wants to become the emperor of the world, who would practice this great sacrifice. And everybody would come, all the great kings, great personalities, sages, demigods even, would come to these Rajasuya sacrifices. very, really important. He invited all the qualified brahmanas and sages to take part and appointed them to different positions as priests in charge of the sacrificial arena. He invited the most expert brahmanas and sages, whose names are as follows: Krishna Dvaipayana, that's Vyasadeva, right? The writer of the Vedas, main character of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasadeva, right? Bharatavad Sumantu Gautama Asita Vashita Chavana Kanava Maitreya Kavasha Trita Vishvamrita Vamadev Sumati Jaimini Kratu Paila Parashara Garga Vaishampayana Artarva Kashyapa Daumya Parashuram Shukacharya Ashurya Vitihotra Muchandra Virasena and Akrata Brana. So great sages, some really amazing personalities here that were invited. Great wise sages, powerful mystics. Besides all these brahmanas and sages, he invited such respectful old men as Dronacharya. Of course, Dronacharya was the military guru of the Pandavas and of also the different Kurus. Bhishma, the grandfather of the Kurus, Kripacharya, and Dhritarashtra. He also invited all the sons of Dhritarashtra, headed by Duryodhana, and the great devotee Vidura was also invited. So Vidura, of course, was the brother, great sage of Dhritarashtra and Pandu. Kings from different parts of the world, along with their ministers and secretaries, were also invited to see the great sacrifice performed by King Yudhishthira, and the citizens comprising learned brahmanas, chivalrous kshatriyas, well-to-do vaishyas, and faithful shudras all visited the ceremony. The brahmana priests and sages in charge of the sacrificial ceremony constructed the sacrificial arena as usual with a plow of gold, and they initiated King Yudhishthira as the performer of the great sacrifice in accordance with Vedic rituals. Long years ago, when Varuna performed a similar sacrifice, all the sacrificial utensils were made of gold. Similarly, in the Rajasuya sacrifice of King Yudhishthira, all the utensils required for the sacrifice were golden. In order to participate in the great sacrifice performed by King Yudhishthira, all the exalted demigods like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Indra, the king of heaven, accompanied by their associates, as well as the predominating deities of higher planetary systems like Gandharva-loka, Siddha-loka, Jana-loka, Tapo-loka, Naga-loka, Yaksha-loka, Raksha-loka, Pashik-loka, and Chalana-loka. So great heavenly planets, the great demigods and citizens of the heavenly planets. So it's just like a serious coronation going on here, as well as famous kings and their queens were all present by the invitation of King Yudhishthira. All the respectable sages, kings, and demigods who assembled there unanimously agreed that King Yudhishthira was quite competent to take the responsibility of performing the Rajasuya sacrifice. No one was in disagreement of this fact. All of them knew thoroughly the position of King Yudhishthira because he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. No accomplishment was extraordinary for him. The learned brahmanas and priests saw to it that the sacrifice by Maharaj Yudhishthira was performed in exactly the same way as in bygone ages by the demigod Varuna. According to the Vedic system, whenever there is an arrangement for sacrifice, the members participating in the sacrifice are offered the juice of the soma plant. The juice of the soma plant is a kind of life-giving beverage. On the day of extracting the soma juice, King Yudhishthira very respectfully received the special priest who had been engaged to detect any mistake in the formalities of sacrificial procedures. So, this is an important point. So, in previous ages, everything was done very officially with the mantras that were chanted by great priests who were very spiritually elevated. And even they had checkers, like, fact checkers, but checkers who would check to make sure the mantras were said right. In this day and age of Kali Yuga, where people's intelligence is very little, their memory is very short, their capacity for any kind of spiritual growth is limited, the sacrifice for the day and age is to hear and repeat Krishna's holy names, and it doesn't actually even have to be pronounced correctly. A lot of times you get people who are in the body of Indian bodies. They've grown up in a Brahmana family and maybe experiencing how mantras are chanted. Criticize great devotees because they have very short, limited spiritual knowledge to see a great devotee, and they criticize them about how they pronounce the words. So this doesn't actually matter, because the potency of the holy name is more powerful than the pronunciation. The holy name of Krishna, chanted by the pure devotee, the pure lover of Krishna with love and affection, is so powerful it can affect the whole universe, actually. So that's important to be noted. On this, okay, so we read that. The idea that the Vedic mantras must be enunciated perfectly and chanted with the proper accent if priests who are engaged in this business commit any mistake, the checker or referee priest immediately corrects the procedure, and thus the ritualistic performances are perfectly executed. Unless it is perfectly executed, a sacrifice cannot yield the desired result. Here's the point that Bhaktivedanta makes. In this age of Kali, there is no such learned brahmanas or priest available. Therefore, all such sacrifices are forbidden. The only sacrifice recommended in the Shastras is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. There you go. Another important procedure is that the most exalted personality in the assembly of such a sacrificial ceremony is first offered worship. After all arrangements were made for Yudhisthira's sacrifice, the next consideration was who should be worshipped first in the ceremony. This particular ceremony is called Agra Puj. Agra means first, and Puj means worship. This Agra Puj is similar to election of the president. In the sacrificial assembly, all the members were very exalted. Some proposed to elect one person as the perfect candidate for accepting Agra Puj, and others proposed someone else. So if they make this like, it's like an election, but the difference between like a presidential election is that most people in this day and age of Kali Yuga who are vote for the president are lower than Shudras, so they don't have really a lot of spiritual vision to elect somebody who is very wise and spiritually advanced to lead the country. And there aren't very many. There are practically no candidates like that at all. Actually, quite the opposite. So we end up electing scoundrels, people who rip off, who are corrupt, who further the materialistic endeavoring of humanity, leading them further into hell. So the devotee of Krishna, the pure devotee of Krishna, is never elected by the votes of men, but actually in the close and dear practice of following the instructions of their spiritual master, they too can become a spiritual master. And this is a very deep subject, but in this case, this Agra Puj was elected by extremely spiritually elevated individuals. So it was quite different than your average election of a president. Some proposed, so when the matter remained undecided, Sahadev began to speak in favor of Lord Krishna. So there were Sahadev and Nakula were twin brothers of the Pandavas. They were actually, their fathers were the twin Ashvini demigods. Sahadev began to speak in favor of Lord Krishna. He said, Lord Krishna is best amongst the members of the Yadu dynasty and the protector of his devotees, is the most exalted personality in this assembly. Therefore, I think he should, without any objection, be offered the honor of being worshipped first. Although demigods such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, the king of the heavenly planets, and many other exalted personalities are present in this assembly, no one can be equal to or greater than Krishna in terms of time, space, riches, strength, reputation, wisdom, renunciation, or any other consideration. Anything which is considered opulent is present originally in Krishna. So Krishna has the original opulences, right? And one of them is renunciation and wisdom and strength and reputation and wealth. So these are the ultimate source of all those things. As an individual soul is the basic principle of the growth of his material body. Similarly, Krishna is the super soul of this cosmic manifestation. All kinds of Vedic ritualistic ceremonies, such as the performance of sacrifices, the offering of oblations in the fire, the chanting of the Vedic hymns, and the practice of mystic yoga are all meant for realizing Krishna. So in this previous yugas, there were so many, the Vedas had so many different practices to help elevate the soul to come closer to Krishna. But in this day and age, most of those practices are too difficult to do. So the most commonly and most powerful way of coming to love Krishna is the hearing and repeating of Krishna's names. We're the most idiotic in this age, the living entity. Any living entity like myself, who's still present in the Kali Yuga, is fool number one to still be here. But we are given, fortunately, a very easy and wonderful practice of hearing and chanting Krishna's names to help us elevate our consciousness and bring us pure love for Krishna. Whether one follows the path of fruitive activities or the path of philosophical speculation, the ultimate destination is Krishna. All bona fide methods of self-realization are meant for understanding Krishna. Ladies and gentlemen, it is superfluous to speak about Krishna because every one of you exalted personalities know the Supreme Brahman, Lord Krishna, for whom there are no material differences between body and soul, between energy and the energetic, or between one part of the body and another. Since everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna, there is no qualitative difference between Krishna and all living entities. Everything is an emanation of Krishna's energies, the material and spiritual energies. Krishna's energies are like the heat and light of the fire. There is no difference between the quality of heat and light and the fire itself. Also, Krishna can do anything he likes with any part of his body. We can execute a particular action with the help of a particular part of our body, but he can do anything and everything with any part of his body, and because his transcendental body is full of knowledge and bliss and eternity, he doesn't undergo the 6 kinds of material changes: birth, existence, growth, fruit of action, dwindling, and vanishing. So here Sahadeva is actually laying out the difference between Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the living entity in the conditioned state, or in the material body. So the material body of the living entity is different than the living entity himself. This has already been laid out. Krishna's body and Krishna's activities and everything about Krishna are all one and the same. So he doesn't have a material body. He has a spiritual body, but he has a spiritual body. So everything and anything in his body, he can do any of the other parts. So he can see with his mouth, or he can eat with his eyes, or taste with his ears. We can't just like put a banana in our ear and be like, oh yeah, that's a good banana. We have limitations to our body. Unforced by any external energy, he is the supreme cause of creation, maintenance, and dissolution of everything that be. So once again, he's laying out all these things that Krishna is. Even though there's Lord Brahma, who's technically the creator of the universe, and the Lord Vishnu, who is the maintainer, and Lord Shiva, who is the destroyer of this, are all indirectly done by Lord Krishna, actually, because all those living entities are the source of emanations from Krishna. By the grace of Krishna only, when everyone is engaged in the practice of religiousness, the development of economic condition, the satisfaction of the senses, and ultimately the achievement of liberation from material bondage, these four principles of progressive life can be executed by the mercy of Krishna only. He should therefore be offered the first worship of this great sacrifice, and no one should disagree, as by watering the root, the watering of the branches, twigs, leaves, and flowers is automatically accomplished, or by supplying food to the stomach, the nutrition and metabolism of all parts of the body are automatically established. And so by offering the first worship to Krishna, everyone present in the meeting, including the great demigods, will be satisfied. If anyone is charitably disposed, it will be good for him to give in charity only to Krishna, who is the supersoul of everyone, regardless of his particular body or individual personality. Krishna is present as a supersoul in every living being, and if we can satisfy him, then automatically every living being becomes satisfied. Very wonderful laying out of explaining this. This is also in the Sri Ishopanishad, in the understanding about the idea that Krishna is Satchitananda. Satchitananda is a vigraha, spiritual form of Satchitananda, eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And we are also are a spiritual entity with eternal bliss and knowledge. Okay, because we are non-different than Krishna energy-wise in quality, right? So when we think about knowledge, right? When we think about the understanding about what is truth and what is not truth, there obviously is different levels of truth, right? So-called truth, right, or so-called knowledge, I should say, not truth. So we can study certain things like in the material world that can teach us a little bit about the material world, but that ultimately does not teach us about the absolute truth, about our identity or about our relationship with God. This kind of knowledge has to come from Krishna. Even though all the knowledges come from Krishna, the ultimate source of knowledge is, and receiving that knowledge from your spiritual master is actually the absolute truth. It can teach you all and everything that you need to know. So that's why it says in the Sri Ishopanishad, Bhaktivedanta makes this point, similar point, but he says that this analogy of when you have a plant and you need to, everything in the plant or the metabolism is succeeded by feeding food to the stomach or by watering the roots. You can't water the leaves of a tree and expect the tree to be nourished. Similarly, if you have limited so-called knowledge of the material world, it's like watering the leaves. It may teach you certain kinds of things about the material world, but it won't ultimately teach you the absolute truth. From that, you have to go to Krishna. You have to go to your spiritual master. You have to go to the knowledge of Bhakti Yoga. So it's a very wonderful point. Sahadev was fortunate to know the glories of Krishna, and after describing them in brief, he stopped speaking. After the speech was delivered, all the members present in that great sacrificial assembly applauded, confirming his words by continuously saying, "Everything that you have said is completely perfect. Everything that you have said is completely perfect." King Yudhisthira, after hearing the confirmation of all present, especially of the Brahmanas and learned sages, worshipped Lord Krishna according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions. First of all, King Yudhisthira, along with his brothers, wives, children, and other relatives and ministers, washed the lotus feet of Krishna and sprinkled the water on their heads. After this, Lord Krishna was offered various kinds of silken garments of yellow color and heaps of jewelry and ornaments were presented before him for his use. King Yudhisthira felt such ecstasy by honoring Krishna, who was his only lovable object, that tears glided down from his eyes, and although he wanted to, he could not see Lord Krishna very well. Lord Krishna was thus worshipped by King Yudhisthira. At that time, all the members present in that assembly stood up with folded hands and began to chant Jaya, Jaya, Namaha, Namaha. When all joined together to offer their respectful obeisances to Krishna, there were showers of flowers from the sky. In that meeting, King Sisupala was also present. Dun, 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 dun. He was an avowed enemy of Krishna for many reasons. So there were many people who actually had seen Krishna. So, as my Guru Dev would say, it's not important to see God. It's important that God sees you. So, for example, what that means is that our loving service to God attracts God. Our love to God attracts God. It's not about just seeing God with your eyes, because Sisupala was an example of a living entity who was envious of God. And so therefore he saw Krishna, but he didn't see Krishna. He didn't actually see who he really was. And therefore he was envious of this, especially since Krishna also stole his fiancée. He was, especially because of Krishna having stolen Rukmini from the marriage ceremony, therefore he could not tolerate such honor to Krishna and glorification of his qualities. Instead of being happy to hear the glories of the Lord, he became very angry. Such like the atheist, when you are envious of God, even though you are openly stating, disavowing, or denying the existence of God, you still in your heart are envious of God. So therefore you can't tolerate when people praise God or praise the devotees of God like Jesus. People get so envious and so offensive. It's just really, really bad. It's really sad, actually. It's more than bad. It's just very sad for those living entities, because they damage their spiritual life so greatly by being so offensive to God and to his devotees. When everyone offered respects to Krishna by standing up, Sisupala remained in his seat. But when he became angry at Krishna's being honored, Sisupala stood up suddenly and, raising his hand, began to speak very strongly and fearlessly against Lord Krishna. He spoke in such a way that Lord Krishna could hear him very distinctly. So, as the fact that we are celebrating Lord Balaram's appearance day in a couple of days, we have a very similar story, a different kind of reaction, but enviousness of God is cited in the story of Romershan. I think we've covered that, where Lord Balaram came into the assembly of great sages, and Romershan Sutta was, let my living entity cat in, came in, was actually envious of by not standing when Lord Balaram came into appearance. Right? Same kind of enviousness. So in this case, Sisupala sat down, didn't stand up, but then got really angry. Ladies and gentlemen, I can appreciate now the statement of the Vedas that, after all, time is a predominating factor. In spite of all endeavors to the contrary, the time element executes its own plan without opposition. For example, one may try his best to live, but when the time for death comes, no one can check it. I see here that although there are many stalwart personalities present in this assembly, the influence of time is so strong that they have been misled by the statement of a boy who has foolishly spoken about Krishna. So that he's not only being offensive to Krishna, he's being offensive to the devotees of Krishna. And we'll see what happens, that Krishna kind of nips that one in the bud real quickly. There are many learned sages and elderly foolish persons present, but still they have accepted the statement of a foolish boy. This means that by the influence of time, even the intelligence of such honored persons as are present in this meeting can be misdirected. So that's pretty funny. So not only is he insulting, he's continuing to insult all the great personalities by saying that they are being misdirected. So even though they're great and incredible spiritual personalities, they're misdirected. So here he's placing himself in the position of judge and of God by, and even as spiritual master, by looking down on other great devotees because he's envious of God. And so when you're envious of God, you have foolish, God convolutes your intelligence by your own desire. I fully agree with the respectful persons here that they are competent enough to select the personality who can be first worshipped, but I cannot agree with the statement of a boy like Sahadev, who has spoken so highly about Krishna and has recommended that Krishna is fit to accept the first worship in the sacrifice. I can see that in this meeting there are many personalities who have undergone great austerities, who are highly learned and have performed many penances. By their knowledge and direction, they can deliver many persons who are suffering from the pangs of material existence. There are great rishis here whose knowledge has no bounds, as well as many self-realized persons and brahmanas also. And therefore, I think that any one of them could have been selected for the first worship, because they are worshipable even by the great demigods, kings, and emperors. I cannot understand how you could have selected this cowherd boy, Krishna, and have left aside all the other great personalities. I think Krishna to be no better than a crow. I just compared the Supreme Lord to a crow. How can he be fit to accept this first worship in this great sacrifice? We cannot even ascertain as yet as to which caste this Krishna belongs or what his actual occupational duty is. Actually, Krishna does not belong to any caste. So he was correct about that. So nor does he have to perform any occupational duty. So Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He doesn't have to be part of a caste. He may play the role in a caste, but he doesn't have to be in a caste, and he doesn't have to be any. He doesn't have to follow the varnashram system, which emanates from him. Basically, is the point. It is stated in the Vedas that the Supreme Lord has nothing to do as his prescribed duty. Whatever has to be done on his behalf is executed by his different energies. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He doesn't have anything. He doesn't need to do anything. And everything that is done is for the benefit of the living entities to come closer to him. Sisupala continued, Krishna does not belong to a high family. He is so independent that no one knows his principles of religious life. It appears that he is outside the jurisdiction of all religious principles. Yes, duh. He is always acts independently, not caring for the Vedic injunctions and regulative principles. Therefore, he is devoid of all good qualities. Actually, when we went back to the story of Narada Muni coming to all the castles, you could see Krishna actually following the religious principles, even though he didn't need to. He was setting the example as a perfect householder and a perfect husband. This is true so Sisupala indirectly praised Krishna by saying he is not within the jurisdiction of Vedic injunction. This is true because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That he has no qualities means that Krishna has no material qualities. And because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he acts independently, not caring for conventions or social or religious principles. Sisupala continued, under these circumstances, how can he be fit to accept the first worship and the sacrifice? Krishna is so foolish that he has left Mathura, which is inhabited by highly elevated persons following the Vedic culture, and he has taken shelter in the ocean where there is not even talk of the Vedas. Instead of living openly, he has constructed a fort within the water and is living in an atmosphere where there is no discussion of Vedic knowledge. And whenever he comes out of the fort, he simply harasses citizens like a dacoit, thief, or rogue. Sisupala went crazy because of Krishna's being elected the supreme first worshipped person in that meeting, and he spoke so irresponsibly that it appeared that he had lost all his good fortune. Being overcast with misfortune, Sisupala continued to insult Krishna further, and Lord Krishna patiently heard him without protest. So Lord Krishna he's not affected by this kind of chitter chatter. Just as a lion does not care when the flock of jackals howl, Lord Krishna remained silent and unprovoked. Krishna did not reply to a single accusation made by Sisupala, but all the members present in the meeting, except a few who agreed with Sisupala, became very agitated because it is the duty of any respectable person to not tolerate blasphemy against God or his devotee. So you had some pretty great warriors in there, and there was about to be a huge fight. Krishna could see that, he didn't want people fighting or being offensive anymore against each other, and he wanted his devotee King Yudhishthira to be, to just eliminate this, nip this thing in the bud. Some of them who thought they could not properly take action against Sisupala left the assembly in protest, covering their ears with their hands in order to not hear further accusations. So it's said in blasphemy, especially, most importantly, there's different kinds of offenses that a person can make against one's against the holy name, against different aspects of practices of bhakti yoga, against the Krishna, and against his devotees of Krishna, and most importantly against the pure devotee of Krishna. It's called the elephant's offense. So when a person is in the presence of hearing offenses, the original thing was to actually stop the person who was making the offense by killing them, but that's a little difficult to do in this day and age. So that the next thing would be to either most likely leave and not cover one's ears like they did, or to actually defeat the person in a discussion. So thus they left the meeting condemning the action of Sisupala. It is the Vedic injunction that whenever there is blasphemy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one must immediately leave. Yeah, you don't want to hear that. It's very dangerous to your spiritual life to be able to hear blasphemy. If he does not do so, he becomes bereft of his pious activities and is degraded to the lower condition of life. So it's also a very important thing that in this day and age of social media and the internet, to not be reading offensive things against the devotee of Krishna, especially, to stay away from that. All the kings present belonging to the Kuru dynasty, Matsya dynasty, Kekaya dynasty, and Srinjaya dynasty became very angry and immediately took up their swords and shields to kill Sisupala. Sisupala was so foolish that he did not become even slightly agitated. Although the king's presents were ready to kill him, he did not care to think of the pros and cons of his foolish talking. And when he saw that all the kings were ready to kill him, instead of stopping, he stood to fight with them and took up his sword and shield. When Lord Krishna thought that they were going to engage in the fighting in the arena of the auspicious Rajasuya sacrifice, he personally pacified them. Out of his causeless mercy, he himself decided to kill Sisupala. Not because he was angry at Sisupala for being offensive to him, but because that he saw a disruption in the auspiciousness of his devotees' sacrifice. So he saw about to be a huge battle, and it would actually make things really bad. So he thought, I'll just deal with this and nip it in the bud, kind of thing. Out of his causeless mercy, and it is causeless mercy, actually, not just for the mercy of everyone present to see that, but the mercy of Sisupala to be eliminated, his body eliminated from making any more offenses, and also to be killed by Krishna is a great auspicious activity. Lord Krishna does everything in the love for his devotees, whether he's angry or wrathful against somebody, he's doing it always for the love of his devotees, even those devotees who have forgotten him and who are the offensive ones. Lord Krishna saw they were going to engage in the fighting in the arena of the auspicious Rajasuya Yajna. He personally pacified them. Out of his causeless mercy, he himself decided to kill Sisupala. When Sisupala was abusing the kings who were about to attack him, Lord Krishna took up his disc, which is as sharp as the blade of a razor, and immediately separated the head of Sisupala from his body. Boom! Easy done. When Sisupala was thus killed, a great roar and howl went up from the crowd of that assembly. Taking advantage of that disturbance, the few kings who were supporters of Sisupala quickly left the assembly out of fear of their lives. But Despite all this, the fortunate Shishupala's spirit soul immediately merged into the body of Lord Krishna in the presence of all members. Exactly as a burning meteor falls to the surface of the globe, Shishupala's soul, merging into the transcendental body of Krishna, reminds us of the story of Jaya and Vijaya, who fell to the material world from the Vaikuntha planets upon being cursed by the four Kumaras. For their return to the Vaikuntha world, it was arranged that both Jaya and Vijaya, for 3 consecutive births, would act as deadly enemies of the Lord, and at the end of these lives they would again return to the Vaikuntha world and serve the Lord and his associates. Although Shishupala acted as the enemy of Krishna, he was not for a single moment out of Krishna consciousness. He was always absorbed in thought of Krishna, and thus he got the first salvation of Sahuja Mukti, merging into the existence of the Supreme and finally being reinstated in his original position of personal service. The Bhagavad Gita corroborates that fact, that if one is absorbed in the thought of the Supreme Lord at the time of death, he immediately enters the kingdom of God after quitting his material body. After the salvation of Shishupala, King Yudhisthira rewarded all the members present in the sacrificial assembly. He sufficiently remunerated the priests and the learned sages for their engagement in the execution of the sacrifice. And after performing all this routine work, he took his bath. This bath at the end of the sacrifice is also technical. It is called Avabrita bath. The Avabrita bath. Lord Krishna thus enabled the performance of the Rajasuya Yajna arranged by King Yudhisthira to be successfully completed, and being requested by his cousins and relatives, he remained in Hastinapura for a few months more. Although King Yudhisthira and his brothers were not willing to have Lord Krishna leave Hastinapura, Krishna arranged to take permission from the king to return to Dwarka, and thus he returned home along with his queens and ministers. The story of the fall of Jaya and Vijaya from the Vaikuntha planets to the material world is described in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The killing of Shishupala has a direct link with that narration of Jaya and Vijaya, but the most important instructions that we get from this incident is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being absolute, can give salvation to everyone, whether one acts as his enemy or as his friend. It is therefore a misconception that the Lord acts with someone in the relationship of a friend and someone else in the relationship of an enemy. His being an enemy or friend is always on the absolute platform. There is no material distinction. After King Yudhisthira took his bath after the sacrifice and stood in the midst of all the learned sages and brahmanas, he seemed exactly like the king of heaven, and thus looked very beautiful. King Yudhisthira sufficiently rewarded all the demigods who participated in the yajna, and being greatly satisfied, all of them left praising the king's activities and glorifying Lord Krishna. When Shukadeva Goswami was narrating these incidents of Krishna's killing Shishupala and describing the successful execution of the Rajasuya Yajna by Maharaj Yudhisthira, he pointed out that after the successful termination of the Yajna, there was only one person who was not very happy. He was Duryodhana. Duryodhana by nature was very envious because of his sinful life, and he appeared in the dynasty of the Kurus as a chronic disease personified in order to destroy the whole family. Shukadeva Goswami assured Maharaj Parikshit that the pastimes of Krishna, the killing of Shishupala and Jarasandha, and the releasing of the imprisoned kings are all transcendental vibrations, and anyone who hears these narrations from the authorized persons will be immediately freed from all reactions of the sinful activities of his life. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 3rd volume, 5th chapter of Krishna, the Deliverance of Sisupala. And we'll learn more about Duryodhana and his kind of... If you haven't already, I would recommend reading the Mahabharata, because this sort of story sort of interconnects with the Srimad Bhagavatam, and some of these stories of the Rajasuya sacrifice and Duryodhana and his enmity with the Pandavas is all about that, the Mahabharata. So I would recommend reading that too. So We've had a pretty long class. We read that whole story, so I'm just going to end it here. And we'll come back to the story next time. Thank you very much. Namaste.